Hi, this is the Social Gelo with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Gelo with Angelo show.
What's up? And welcome to Social Gelo with Angelo. Today I'm here with Glen Fratecelli. I'm saying that with a Spanish accent, aren't I?
Yeah, you are kind of a Fratecelli, right? So the emphasis on the syllable has to be a little different.
Yeah, I was just telling someone else, I'm like, yeah, these are the times that it's very apparent that English is my second language. So so as you saw,
I wouldn't have known unless you said that, though.
Yeah, well, thank you. So as you saw on the title, this is entitled "Healing Arts," the healing arts, and martial arts. I think this is a title. Maybe later I'll call it something else, but it'll definitely have healing arts in the title. And I have Glen here. Before we get started, I just want to throw a shameless plug for Glen. Very soon, I've been saying this more often. This is not the Kaju Kembo podcast. I know it says Kaju Kembo back there. That's because I'm an instructor and I like to have it there. But this is a Social Gelo with Angelo podcast, a podcast about psychology and martial arts. And but there may be, I've heard a rumor that perhaps there is going to be an official Kaju Kembo podcast called Kaju Kembo Talk Story. Glen, do you mind kind of shedding some light on that real quick?
Absolutely. So this is going to be a KSDI sponsored podcast. And the idea of Kaju Kembo Talk Story is to have a conversation and communication in a way to educate folks on the history and development of Kaju Kembo, not just by how it was told word of mouth, but by actual data, information, written history by Cijo and others, advertisements. We're going and linking it way back, and we're going to follow this along, as well as have some of the key players involved with this to elaborate more on where it is today. So linking the past, bringing it to today, and talk about the future. That's what we're going to do.
That's cool. So for anybody watching or listening, stay tuned. It's in the works, the Kaju Kembo Talk Story podcast. Now, for this podcast, I'm wearing a Kaju Life. For those people who are listening to this, I'm wearing a hoodie that says Kaju Life. But what you cannot see, well, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can. But if you can't see, Glen is wearing formal attire today. He's wearing his white gi, and he explained to me why he doesn't. I thought that was pretty cool. Why are you wearing a white gi, Glen?
Well, if people see me in Kaju Kembo events, or mostly any event, martial arts wise, I wear the white gi, the old school white karate gi, and it represents the past. It represents those who came before us and put their blood and sweat in this game of Kaju Kembo primarily to make it where it is and hand it down to us. Now, I wear it, it's tattered and torn, it's kind of shredded, although mine's a little cleaner than theirs probably was because I bleach it. I mean, it's tattered and torn just to represent the humble beginnings and where they came from. I mean, a lot of them made their gis out of rice bags and things like that, or they didn't have gis at all. So what I want to do is just remember this every time I strap this on with the black belt. Every time I put this around my waist, over my shoulders and on, I can do nothing but think about them. And I want to represent what they've done for us.
That's really cool. And they say that the white represents integrity and purity. I think that was the saying, right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, possibly, or they probably didn't have any dye back then, so. It all depends where you're coming from, right? But yeah, integrity, purity. Mine is just like honoring. When I look at that, it's honoring.
That's really cool. And then your patch. I'm looking at your patch here, and I've seen you wear that patch. Where's it? If you don't mind me asking, what's your patch represent, brother?
So this beautiful patch is one of the original, and not the original, but one of the original patches from Kaju Kembo KSDI back in the days of Palama settlement. There were a few iterations. This one comes from Masoyama's cover of his book, had the two characters that you see. It was Cijo's favorite book, and he had somebody design this. Now, if you see some of the group pictures of Palama students or Wahiwa students, there's a few of them in their jackets. They're like Letterman's jackets. Well, that's this patch in a larger scale, representing where they came from. And I'm under the impression that at that time they were setting up teams to go fight tournaments, and they were kind of organizing then the KSCI. And Cijo had given these jackets to them as gifts. So we had the Wahiwa group who had one jacket, and then the Palama Settlement group had another, but they all had these patches. And so this one was redone many years later, probably in the 70s. Gary Forback wanted to redo it, so he reduced it, created a patch that was a smaller size than the original. And so not very many people wear it. Hey, this is my bread and butter right here. I love it. And it always makes me feel, you know, we have to link it back. Those roots, they're strong. We just have to keep reminding ourselves.
Oh yeah, that's a dope patch. I like it.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned real quick a book written by Masoyama. Did I catch that correctly?
What is karate? Yes.
All right.
Okay. I probably have it, but I'm not going to bend over and dig for it right now.
No.
I do have the book, the original, and I do have, and the cover photo, it's showing, you know, a guy in a red belt, one blocking, one kicking, and Cesar loved that so much, that's where they pulled the image from.
Oh, that's really cool. And then for anybody watching this who's already a Kajukenbo practitioner, they know what KSDI is. But for anybody watching this who's just happened to be, and I'm sorry, I apologize to these people who just happened to be Googling and found the show. They're like, what is going on? Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
You know? So would you mind explaining what KSDI is?
Well, Kajukenbo Self-Defense Institute was the original organization of Kajukenbo back in the 50s. There's written documentation of when it first kind of became incorporated or first started to be used, and it was like 57 or so. And that's when the Palama Settlement School started to have branches. So now from a school, from the Palama School, now you have an institute, right? You're starting to set up schools around the island.
All right.
So that is what we carry on, because that's Cijo's original organization, handed to his family, and we're continuing on by honoring Cijo himself, as well as Kajukenbo's growth, its roots, and its development.
And then for those of you who just so happen to haphazardly come to this as the first podcast you watched or listened to, Kajukenbo is a martial art started in Hawaii. Google it. I've done episodes about it, but Google it. That'll be much easier. I don't want to do another What is Kajukenbo. I've done enough What is Kajukenbo podcasts. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there. I'm going back to that statement. I don't want to go there yet.
Although the story's always changing, right?
Yeah. It's never the same answer to the question, but
it never and it never should be.
Yeah, and that's Kajukenbo. There, we answered it in 2 minutes. All right, so.
That was good.
So how did you get into Kajukenbo? How'd that happen for you?
Yeah, well, my martial arts started a long time ago. So I've been in the arts one way or the other since I was 6 years old, 54 years ago. So 54 years ago, I walked into our living room. We had a Christmas tree, and there was a big box there. And my birthday is day after Christmas. So my dad said, "Here's your birthday present." 6 years old, right? I opened it, man. I was waiting for Rock'em Sock'em Robots or something crazy like that, right? Those old school toys. It was boxing gloves. And he says, "You're going to learn to fight." Father was a boxer from Kalihi, trained at Palama Settlement, was in that whole area. He says that you're going to learn to fight, and that's what you're going to do. And that is where it started. From there, I was just so intrigued. For some reason, and I don't know why, maybe it's in DNA, but I could fight, right? I could take the hit. I could give the hit. I loved it. It was good. Contact sports for me, golden. From there, I started watching movies and hanging around with folks, and there was this big thing called karate starting out. You know, it was like karate, kung fu. These places started popping up. And about 5 years into my boxing training, I saw this kung fu school, and I said, "Dad, I want to take kung fu here." You know, it's like, I'm ready to go. You know, it's like, you know, we heard about Bruce Lee and the Green Hornet, right? And he's like, "No." I'm like, "What do you mean, no? What's wrong with boxing?" Right? Because he was a boxer. That was his game. He goes, "I learned to box, and we were taking care of those karate guys out there." You know, so my mom convinced him to do it, right? To allow me to go, but he didn't take me there. So I had to ride my bike 6-7 miles every day, because I would go class or not, I'd go watch. Beautiful thing about that is, and this is what we'll talk about when we get into healing arts, it was my first introduction to Yin Yang, right? The Yin Yang, because we had a demonstration, and a guy comes out in a white gi buzz cut, kind of looked like me, I was doing Kung Fu, Hapu Kung Fu, Black Tiger, but it was really hard, right? And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool, intense. He was doing more karate style. Then the next guy comes out, black satin gi, long hair, long beard, doing the same moves, soft style. And they said, this is how you learn. It's the Yin Yang. And so that right there showed there's some sort of balance here. There's not only one way. And that kind of intrigued me ongoing until this day. From there, I stayed for a while and I went and learned more Kung Fu from Dok Fai Wong, who was a Choi Foot master back then. And when you say master back then, that was master. He was just the man. He brought her over from China. He was out of San Francisco. He'd come down to our school, our high school, and teach. I learned that. It was really cool. Started to get pretty good. And then there was this gentleman, Harry Mock, who was going around selecting folks because the tournament started to grow, selecting folks to go fight tournaments. So he's putting together a team from the best. So he had a team. He pulled me in. I was always younger than these guys. He pulled me in. I was a good fighter. I was kind of like secondary and stuff. And, I was like, okay, I'm on this team. We're hardcore. We used to use the big Kempo gloves. And these are, mind you, these are point tournaments, right? So I'm wearing these big Kempo gloves. We would, right? But back there, point tournaments is you get the point as long as you don't draw blood. So you can hit. It's like, and you don't have to wear pads. So we use them because in Enter the Dragon, Lee had him in that opening scene, right? So that being said, I wasn't very good at point tournaments because I was a boxer and I was blasting. So I thought you just hit. So I had a lot of disqualifications. From there, I continued on. And then a few years later, Harry was going to China to do some movies, right? Martial arts, movies, kind of tied with him. He's a great character, great martial arts. He brought me over to Fremont, California, and he dropped us off at this gentleman's house. And he says, hey, you're going to train with him until I get back. Well, it was a Kaji Kembo school. And well, that wasn't my first introduction to Kaji Kembo as a fighting style, as an art it was. But when I was about 7 years old, we used to go to Pacifica and we used to go to my uncle's house. And we used to walk up the driveway. And every time I look in the windows, there'd be these images of guys doing karate. And that's when I first started thinking I want to do karate. And I'd go, hang out with my uncle, we'd do this, we'd do that. Well, come to find out later on, my uncle was Joe Halguna, right? One of the pioneers of Kaji Kembo. Never trained from him. I trained with him later on, but that was like, oh, okay. Later during the years, I found that out, talking to my mom. She said, yeah, that's Joe Halguna. I'm like, whoa. So that being said, we trained and started learning Kaji Kembo. And the unique thing about when I first started, the way our instructor taught was how to fight. Nothing else. It's just you take the skills of Kaji Kembo, karate, wrestling. He was a wrestler. He was good. And we'd learn how to fight. And we would fight. And we would brawl. And we'd settle things. If we got an argument, he'd say, take it on the mat. And it was pretty hardcore. It was some interesting things. We'd go out to the mountains. We'd do some camping, but we'd be out there training. It's just like running amok at that time, thinking you were training for this great martial arts battle like you'd see in the movies, right? So we did everything under the sun. The boxers, I'd help teach the boxing skills, the kicking skills. And then I realized this is what I like, the contact. This is the martial art that's good for me. It's good because I didn't really have to hold back. Stopped that point tournament game. We got into this thing called full contact karate back then. Not kickboxing, it wasn't called, it was full contact karate. And we would use they just started getting the gloves, not boxing gloves, but they were like the chops or whatever they were called, no foot pads at the time. And interesting thing was one of my bouts, shin kick to the nose. I took it, saw a double, kept trying to fight, but I couldn't say it. I was like, this hurts. And then they called it. So I'm laying down inside the locker room. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Al Novak.
I haven't, no.
So Al Novak was a big...
Oh, wait, yes, Novak. Yes, I have.
And this is tying into the healing arts because this is my first impression, right? This is my first wow, I want to do that. So he looks at me and he's like, oh, you're gonna have to go to the doctor's then. Your nose under your eye. And he's like, oh, wait a minute. He looks on my shirt and it says Kaji Kembo. He goes, you're Kaji Kembo? because he was really tied into Sijo Kajukenbo back then. He was one of honored with a 10th degree in his Chinese arts from Sijo. And he says, "Oh, you're Kajukenbo." So he just reached his hand, he grabbed my nose and straightened it. Pop, 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 pop. And it was hurting more, it was constant. He said, "That's good." He goes, "I saw your Kajukenbo. I know you can handle that." I'm like, so, that's my first thing. But in my mind, it's like, I want to do that. I want to be able to help people like that. That was cool. I've seen that guy just, put back hips and all these things. He was always the one they'd call at the tournaments. And moving on from there, my martial arts, I started studying and I joined the military. So I took what I learned, I taught everywhere I went, I learned everywhere I went, continued my martial arts path. Got back to the States, the work I was doing, I wasn't out there, it was kind of like behind the scenes. I spent 30 years in the military, so did a lot of stateside stuff and kept falling into this Kajukenbo way until finally I said, you know what, I'm gonna have to learn the arts. I can fight, I can do all the techniques, but let's put this down and let me learn the sequences. Let me learn where it came. So that's where I started getting in touch with this development, this mindset. I was very lucky, I was being in California, we're surrounded with 4 of the 5 pioneers. So we have Halbuna, we have Gaylord, we have Ramos, we have Reyes. Alihu Reyes passed away before I got back. It was earlier in the 70s, but then you have Ramos, Gaylord, and then you have Halbuna. So being at Travis Air Force Base, I was very close to a few of them. Actually lived with Aldo and Tony Ramos for a while. So there's a lot of insights I've got in my head from our deep conversations on Kajukenbo and development and political stuff too, right? But that's kind of my path. And I haven't been able to have 1,000 black belts like many, because everywhere I go, I was there 2 years and I left. A year here, a year there. So I had a lot of green belts. I taught a lot and that's all. But my main thing was training. I love to teach, but I love to train, man. I love to eat that leather and I like to just the whole body movement, I'm trying to last forever, right? Which we know he can't, so it's being smart about it. And it's kind of my path, and it led me through here. It moved up the ranks, developed myself, developed my skills in parallel with the healing arts, which we're going to talk about. So it's kind of like my path, that's very general of it. I've been privileged to a lot in the world of Kajukenbo, in the world of martial arts. I've been very lucky to meet up with quite a few folks and train, and that's my thing. I like to train.
And you mentioned the healing arts was always kind of there.
Yeah.
How was that transition for you then? So like you had when you met Novak, did I say that right? Novak, right?
Yeah.
Alan Novak, when he realigned your nose after getting it essentially broken. You realize that's something really cool that I really want to do that one day. When did you decide to do that? How did that transition happen?
Well, it was actually before that, right? So I knew I wanted to do it, but that was it in action.
Okay.
So I know I wanted to do it. And this is funny because growing up, I was very shy, very much to myself. I would sit in my room a lot and I'd practice a lot and I'd breathe a lot and I'd try to mimic these Kung Fu guys on the movies, right? I'm talking about hours a day by myself. So I learned meditation by meditating without calling it meditation. I learned breath work by breathing without calling it breath work. I learned movement in Tai Chi without learning the movements that are prescribed in Tai Chi. I've learned all of these things, how to walk with meditation, how to walk through the park, I learned all of these things, and this is my balance, my peace, right? And I go train, I'd be hardcore. It was very much my way of healing myself through life, because a lot of things hit you when you're young, and maintaining that health. And as I realized, I work with folks and someone would dislocate their shoulder, I'd find myself just jostling and breathing and say, breathe, relax, go, and then go back in place. I'm like, ooh, okay. it's like, how'd you learn how to do that? And I just say, yeah, some guy taught me. Nobody taught me. It was just, I understood there's something about flowing. There's something about letting it go. And there's something, and I learned that from just that centering of myself as a young guy. And that continued. So there is where I knew this is the path. And then when Al actually did it, I said, I have to seek out a training. Because I talked to Al, and he started at the Swedish Institute in New York. He started with massage therapy. And the beautiful thing about it is that's where I started, right? So many years later, I said, I'm going to follow that path. My wife actually found me the school, one of the best schools of massage therapy, because it was well-rounded, had Eastern, Western therapies. This started to happen when I was about the actual training when I was about 20. But before that, I was learning anatomy, physiology, kinesiology on my own, just studying and learning and studying and learning. So that transition really started as me doing it. I actually did it as a profession for many years, and I still do healing arts. I work with folks all the time. Yeah, that transition, it just kind of evolved. It shouldn't have been separated from the martial arts, right? So I hear the stories, right? 1,000 years ago, when someone would get hurt, they wouldn't go to the doctor. They would go to the master, because the master of martial arts dealt with pain and healing all the time, dealt with bruises and breaks and stuff. They knew what to do because they were doing it all the time. So, and that's kind of like that transition of, this is what I need to do. Yeah.
And you mentioned in there the breath work. And there's something that I want to bring in. So without taking up too much time, I'll try to do this within a minute or so. All right. Yeah, when I first started martial arts, I want to say I was more spiritually mindseted when I started. I did a lot of my own breath work and stuff, right? And then as I got into harder styles, I stepped away from all that. As I started studying psychology and going to college, I stepped away from all that. I started getting more scientific with my approaches.
Yes.
I wanted to experiment. And Kajuken was all about experimenting, pressure testing, right? Yes. And that went into the academic world. I want to experiment. I want to see. And then at the end of that journey, when I ended up getting my degree in psychology, towards the end there, the biggest craze was something called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And it was coming out in research and still is to this day, the most efficacious. And if you don't know what efficacious is for my listeners, it means effective. They use a different word in science. And effective, not in the general sense of effective, but efficacious means that they've gotten a bunch of control groups, double placebo studies, to make sure that this is working properly. And they were testing CBT techniques, specifically breathing, meditating, mindfulness, active meditation, walking, nature, what they now call nature exposure therapy. And they were testing this stuff towards actual pharmaceutical drugs. They put people on pharmaceutical drugs, and then they just give them they give a placebo group, say that, hey, we're giving everyone the drugs. to make this simple. We're giving everyone the drugs, but they weren't giving it to one group. And they ended up finding out that these CBT techniques were, in some cases, more effective than the actual pharmaceutical interventions. So it's really interesting when we talk about healing arts, right? Like this thing. And it brought me back to that. I was like, oh man, yeah. I was on this full circle. I was on to something. I let it go because I thought it might be woo. And then I come back and I wait, it wasn't woo. I need to get back into it. Oh, and then I ended up getting back into my practice.
Right.
But it's one of those things, like, you get into your practice, you get out of your practice. How's that been for you? Like, you get into your practice, you do breathing work, life gets busy. How did you balance that? Like how and I have a story to follow that up, but for you, how did you kind of balance that? How did you kind of like get in and out, and how do you like set a routine for your practice?
Right. So, it's funny you bring that up, and I did it almost the opposite, right? So early on it was natural. And then I said, I went back in when I started I was so intrigued with the science, right? Anatomy, physiology, kinesiology, right? I was so intrigued with why these ways worked, right? So I tied them in. I don't really live in balance, right? So let me tell you about my thought. And right, it's my experience and how I go. I live in the pendulum swing, because for me to be extraordinary or to do extraordinary things, I have to be way out here. My art needs to be, when I need to learn how to fight, and I just need to swing it. I need to swing it, train, but I need to come back to center. So that center is where I kind of ride for a little while to bring it, and then I come here to bring it down, right? So it is a way that's just, they go hand in hand, right? And we have to be able to eat, the East meets the West, and the Yin Yang, right? So everyone gets caught up on the symbols, but that line in between is what's real, right? That merger, that meshing, that place of center. And that's the pendulum right there swinging back and forth. So my idea about it is they can't be separated. Because I speak of chi, doesn't mean because you don't believe in it that it doesn't in other ways run through your body. There's always a life force, there's always an energy, there's always emotion, there's always a movement, right? There's something that is the catalyst for life. And you call it what you want, the breath of God or whatever, you call it what you want. But I'll tell you, my belief patterns so much in an ebb and flow that I can't separate it. Yeah. The greatest self-defense is living harmoniously, less conflict, right? So how they say you come to conflict, walk away, but if you're living harmoniously, less conflict you have. Not that you'll never have it, but we train hard the arts. We go into that superficial hard style. We go into that kung fu. We go into all these strikes and all these abilities to handle a situation. When we're peaceful and harmonious within, a lot of times those situations happen less, right? Or we get that awareness and listen to that intuition. So when I speak healing arts, a lot of people think of what I do with others, right? Or what someone does with others. I never think of someone as a healer, and this is me. A lot of says I'm a healer. No, what it is I facilitate the process of healing within you. Your body knows what to do. I just have to remind it. So the whole thing with this living harmoniously, and that comes from that breath work, that comes from that meditation, that comes from that peacefulness, that comes from that centeredness. And I train it, but then I have to come back to that martial way. I come here and then I go and I get the skills going, get that, I'm very animated. I'm going to move. I got the Italian last name, right? So you're going to see me move. You're going to see me in the fight, right? Because it becomes real. So healing arts starts with healing yourself. For me to work with others or help others, I have to be there. I have to come from the center, and you don't always stay there. It's like we think, he meditates all the time, he's mindfulness all the time. No, but you rub me the wrong way, my mind gets in the way, and so then, but I have to take that sacred breath, that sacred pause, and this is my health, right? So that's kind of where healing arts start with me. If anyone ever trains from me, I teach them or share with them to start to work on themselves first. What are you doing to keep your life in harmony? What are you doing to keep your breath in harmony? What are you doing to keep your actual body in harmony? What are you doing? It's like, how are you balancing the body, mind, and spirit, which is everything. So that's kind of like where it starts. Healing arts is that, right? And so that's the first teaching. Learning to sit with the breath.
And I think you mentioned a really good one, and I think that's something that a lot of people that don't. And when I'm about to say this, I want to say this in the most non-secular way possible. And I'm going to make a disclaimer. I'm not a religious person. I'll say that. But when we talk about mindfulness and Zen meditation techniques and the scholarly work of Zen, reading about people who were enlightened before us. If you want to call it, if you want to put a label to this, people like, the Christian version of Jesus Christ, the East version of the Buddha.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about these people that were enlightened, a lot of people see people talking about that and imagine then you must be really at peace, right? You must be someone who's really in harmony. I always tell people, I got anger management problems. And I'm like, what? Like, I have anger management problems. This is why I do. Why am I breathing? Why am I trying to calm myself down? Because if I don't, I'll freak the fuck out. And someone I'll either hurt someone. I've been lucky enough that in my life, I haven't physically hurt too many people, but as you know, doing what we do, I have physically hurt a lot of people. And I've also verbally hurt people, which I feel the worst about. The physical, I don't feel as bad because we were in most of the time we were in a situation where we both agreed to it. The verbal is what bothers me the most because both parties did not agree to that. And I'm constantly telling people that, no, I'm like, if enlightenment is a thing, I feel like at some points in my life, I was more enlightened than others. And if I forget, if I become unconscious, as they say in these practices, we talk about conscious and versus unconscious. And when I say this for the people listening, I don't mean like sleeping and awake, but I kind of do, where you're kind of just going through life's motions unconsciously, going into work, getting back, and it turns into this routine. And that's the old school ringer, man. That's the old school ringer. I like that one.
That was my phone. Give me 1 second. I can't.
Oh no! Yeah. So yeah. When like I was saying earlier, there's this thing about being unconscious. You get through your routines, and then suddenly, when you ignore that, you blow up. Or I don't know you. I should say me. I blow up. I ignore that. I fall out of alignment. I end up hurting the people closest to me. I end up saying something hurtful. And I tell the people closest to me now, hey, when I get like that, stop me and tell me I'm doing it. Because one thing I've read when I started getting really deep into anger management, like reading books on anger management, was that it's suffering from anger management is a weird way of suffering from social anxiety. Whereas the average person says, I feel anxious, I feel nervous, I feel scared. As a martial artist, we don't like scared. We don't like that vulnerability. So we will flip it as the yin yang, right? We're going to grab that and turn it into fire. Yeah. And that can be dangerous. Even if it's not physical, even if it's just verbal. I think it's really bad when it's verbal because again, it's the people we love that get hurt. So like again, you got to bring it down, right?
Right. No, you really should. And, there's a technique I always use and it's helped me. And it's just that sacred pause, right? So it's taking that breath, centering for a moment before you even respond, right? So sometimes the best response is no response or the absence of that momentary, reaction is good. Even in the art. So many times I almost went, and I'm talking, did a strike or really went and I just had to take that pause and everything just kind of fell into place. You think about martial arts and how we train to react spontaneously. Sometimes you listen to intuition, you get that feeling. And that's part of the healing arts too. You develop that intuition greatly because you know when it's go time, right? And sometimes you should be going before they even attempt. The old Kaji Kimbo way, man, hit hard, hit fast, hit first. But that sacred pause, right? Especially when it's verbal, because the damage it can be devastating and everlasting, right? Yeah. Because it takes a lot to unfold and unwind and remove those layers because we all have them. I work through things every day, right? But it's just, that's why it's called a practice, not a perfect.
Yeah.
We practice it every day.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I'm always reminding myself when I see myself becoming unconscious is focusing back into the now. What am I doing right now? What am I looking at? What's happening? Because it's really easy to project yourself into the past and dwell on the past. And it's really easy to project yourself into the future as well. People think, okay, I'm not going to think about the past. But then your monkey mind is interesting because it's going to grab that and say, okay, well, let's not think about the past. Let's think about the future. Let's worry about the future. Let's think about what's going to happen next. And totally forgetting that whatever's going to happen next, you got to focus on what's happening right here to get there. And it's happening right now, right? So
and the better the next will be if you're in the now, making it as good as you can and experiencing that, right? So it's never about destination. It's always about the journey.
Exactly. And you've already arrived. And you've already arrived. It's something I keep telling myself.
This is the only thing that's real. Right? It's an illusion, right? Or interpretation of an illusion.
Yeah.
We all interpret it differently. You know how it goes. I mean, but the beauty of the healing arts and the martial arts is just that. And a lot of folks will be proud of their titles And then you look at their life and their way of being and how they are with people. It's like, oh, you could fight, you could throw the blood, but what is a true artist, right, of life, martial artist, right? And that encompasses that centeredness, that encompasses that way of, if someone gets hurt, I can help them that way too, right? I'm not saying if someone gets shot, I'm gonna be able to plug it up, but I know ways of like a first aid to at least that level in many ways, and even more. And I've practice that, and I have it in my mind to be able to help those situations, especially in the games we play, man. You hurt somebody, it's like, oh, what do I do? Oh my gosh, get some ice for everything. The healing arts was in the martial arts way back when, and I could even go back, it could have been in Kajukenbo. So if you think about it, in 1930, Okazaki in Hawaii actually had his, what they called massage, because that was what is acceptable in this area, and it did a lot of things, and he taught that in his art. He kept it. Now I'm going to read you something that's pretty interesting, and this is an advertisement in 1947 in the Honolulu Star. Natural Health and Beauty Institute for health, neuralgia, rheumatism, asthma, nervousness, tiredness, constipation, backache, headache, insomnia, for beauty form, for baldness, for gray hair. Contact Professor James Matosi. Now, can you imagine if he would have taught that and it would have been just carried into Kajukenbo? And I had never heard of him teaching it, but I know he would advertise about it. That's about all I know. So, it's like the healing arts were always there. More so in ancient times, which wherever that is, a lot of arts kept it, but we really lost it, and it's a very important part. You have to know, we're in this, we're going to get injured. Our students are going to get injured. They're going to injure themselves. You should know what to do, at least at a first level. And that's the entry level of martial arts, right? So what I like to do is go into schools and I'll teach them how to do some shiatsu work. Now, I've developed a very simple way shiatsu form that is based off of a shiatsu that came from Japan. In fact, in my healing arts, right? I want to go down this path really quick, and I'm sorry.
No, please do.
I started at a massage school, right? So when I was there, I got really intrigued because it was 1,000 hours of training, 500 on the east, 500 on the west, Western modalities. You learn about proprioception and neuromuscular stretching, and you learn about soft tissue work and massage of all types of modalities, from Swedish to very specific for injuries. Then on the other side, you learn about Qi, Yin Yang, 5-phase theory. You learn about energetic balancing. You learn about breath work, all these things that I was experimenting with, right? So I was all into that. So I stayed there. I started a good practice. I started teaching there. I became a teacher there. And I said, you know what? I need to enrich my skills. So I went to an acupuncture school for 1 year just to learn the theory and practice, because I was still teaching at the school. I didn't want to be an acupuncturist. My goal was to continue in that path, but I wanted to teach. So I wanted to really know. So I started developing curriculum for this school, and I started writing their shiatsu programs and expanding on it and enhancing it and developing it. Added, Tai Chi in there and just basic ways. But what I was good at was the balance of East and West. For many years as I taught, I then became the director of education, and I started kind of, basically running the school in a sense. But I realized that there is a communication way. There is a language that the West can hear when you talk about Eastern ways. If you go into 5-phase theory, Qi, and all this, it's like, what? What are you saying? But if you talk about other ways or talk in other ways to express it, it becomes like, oh, I get that. Or if you give them experiences of it, right? And if you bring it down to like, it's nothing mystical. I don't have this Qi and I throw it into your body, like, thing. It's the same in the martial arts, right? It's just energy is a catalyst. Energy, for something to really be alive or anything, it has to have an energy base. What you call it, at what level it is, and it starts from non-specific to specific. If you can influence it along the way, you can change its trajectory. If you can change its trajectory in the body by a touch, by scaring someone, the body changes, right? You know how sometimes you just go to somebody and you say, yeah, and they're like, things change. They tighten, it's a change. But if you go up to somebody and you touch and if they have full confidence in you, if you have good respect, it's like the mother's hand. For some, that's not good. For others, it's good. But it's that nurturing and the ability to facilitate this mind to start to investigate. So now you go into the Western way. I'm touching here. What does that do? I know there's a touch because my mind felt it. What happens physiologically? My body starts to investigate what's going on there. And if it's a little bit of pain, my body starts to send endorphins. The blood starts to flow. This is all healing properties. You start to work it and know what's under your hand, and you do it in a specific manner, then real change starts to occur, right? So just by me pushing into this area, working, having you breathe, you relax more, right? So you breathe, you relax, changes, blood flows, all of these healing properties, lymph starts to flow, cleaning things out, and you're working your breath, and you both relax, and their mind starts to calm. You're healing, man, And that's where it starts. And that's as simple as it could get. It's so simple that it's difficult. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I like to go into schools and I will teach. What I do is I'll say, hey, I'll give you a freebie. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to teach you guys a back sequence. So you can lie on, you can do a back shiatsu sequence. I'm going to talk to you about pressing and softening the tissue. You're going to prepare the space. Just like you would in martial arts. You're preparing the battle space, right? So you work with their breath. You start to get their flow and you start to feel, and then you start to press and soften and they relax because you're working in synchronization. It's harmonious flow, right? Just like in martial arts, right? You can get that dance going on, bam, right? So you start to get that and you're flowing and they're relaxing and it's changing. And you feel that area and you stay there a little bit. And then you start to do the point work, just by knowing the specific things. You do that after class with your classmates in your school, in your dojo. Pretty soon, hey man, my hips bother me. Okay, let me do some softening. Let me do some point work. You start to, that's your healing arts, and then that's the entry level, right? So that's a beautiful thing that at least I think many martial artists should know. I'd love to see it start to come back into the schools. I like to see it. There's so many stripes that people have on their belts. I like to see one of them being their healing art. It'd be so cool, right? So so there's advancement to it where you could actually do katas, right? So you could do sequences, do forms of a shiatsu form on somebody's body. So if it's nothing specific, you're going to want to balance the flow of energy, the movement of chi, the movement of blood, or just relax them. It doesn't matter. 1 hour of work, just flowing, going through the whole body, getting the right points, getting the right push, getting the right pressure, getting the right everything, working with the breath. And if you have a good, solid, grounded breath, theirs will start to synchronize, and start to find these areas. And then there's a specific work. I know there's a shoulder issue. I got all that in my head, so we could teach how to do that. You look at the phases of an injury. There's all these things, and I go on forever because this is like a 20-hour class, right? There's phases of an injury, right? You have the introductory, that entry, that first hit. It's hot. It's like fire. It's red. It's swelling. It's stinging. What do you do with fire? You don't put your hands in it. So I work over here, and I get the body to start to respond and bring some of that blood this way and bring some of that lymph this way to calm this down. Then after a while, it goes into different phases of healing. Then you say, hey, it's cold now, it's cooling, so let me get some heat there. Let me get some warmth there. Let me get some things there that will start to allow it to continue its motion. That's why we get stuck in the cycle of a reoccurring injury. We get it to a point where it doesn't hurt, but deep down inside, it's not healed. It's not aligned correctly. It's not aligned properly. Your mind starts to limit its motion even more than the body will. Because, I can't, and that causes injuries in itself. So those are the things like I'd love to share, but those are the things that we should be knowing, right? And like I said, it starts with the self, then we can work with others, and I tell you, it's such a peaceful game, but it's a lot of work, like everything else. You want to have a good punch, you want to punch 1,000 times, you get that one right. You want to do good shiatsu work, you want to hit that point 1,000 times, you get that one right. But once you get that one right over and over, you realize it's that point and everybody's different. Just like that punch, it's not going to be the same each time. And there's so many parallels to the arts. the engagement of that process of facilitating health, that it's just, they should be inseparable.
And how did you? So I'm going to share a story about what happened to me when I first got more into when I kind of left you off when I told you I got back into psychology. I realized that breath work's really important.
Yeah.
I realized that taking care of myself and my center is really important. I fall in and out of that, I'm only human. But
Right.
at one point when I first discovered that, what I like to say, when I started becoming very conscious again, of what was of the people around me and who I was with, I got into interpretive dance, and everybody made fun of me. Like, what are you, what are you doing interpretive dance for? And, and if you've ever seen interpretive dance, the interpretive dance in action is a wild looking thing. They don't use music sometimes, and if they do, it's really awkward sounds. And so I start, of course, trying to tell anybody. I was embarrassed at first to tell people that I was doing interpretive dance, because it wasn't something I was going to sign up for. I just took a course to fulfill a college requirement. And next thing you know, I'm doing a performance on stage, and everyone's like, "What are you doing?"
Oh, that's good.
But it's funny that I fell in love with this thing that nobody could understand. It was like Kaji Kembo all over again. I fell in love with Kaji Kembo, but nobody who was not a martial artist understood it. And now I fell in love with this new thing, and nobody understood that. Not even the Kaji Kembo guys. Yeah, your wife is letting you move around with other bodies like this, and it has nothing to do with that. But it was weird that when I got so into it, because in interpretive dance, you have to really be in sync with yourself and sync with the other person. That's just like martial arts. But it was no longer about hurting them. It was about being in sync to make sure they don't hurt themselves, because we're doing these crazy moves where we're like throwing a person in the air and catching them and stuff. So like I have to really be in sync with my partner. Sometimes there would be no sequence. I literally have to sit there and flow, what they call free flow, and they're moving around. I have to make sure they don't get hurt, and I don't get hurt while doing it. And this experience almost made me quit martial arts. I had this weird epiphany during one of my interpretive dance things where I'm like, I've been hurting people. This, because the instructor was like, "You're really good at this. I want you to take the advanced." Yeah. That's how I went from a basic dance class to the advanced and doing a performance in interpretive dance. The instructor was also a judoka. And she was like, "You're really good at this. What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I do martial arts." She's like, "Oh, well, me too. And some of the stuff we're doing is actually judo." I'm like, oh, and I really got into it, right? But I had this weird epiphany while I was working once, and I broke down and started crying at the end of class, and everyone was like, "Why is this guy's having a breakdown? Why is this guy having a breakdown?" And I explained, like, all the students left, and I told the teacher, I'm like, "I've been hurting people. This thing that I now love, that we're doing to express ourselves and help others, and we're helping each other, and we're healing, and we're talking about past trauma, because that's what happens. I don't know how it happens, but that's what happens. Start working with the body, and the mind starts coming in." Yes. And we'd have these conversations about past trauma, and we're just really open, created this ohana, if you will, in dance. And I thought about how I've been hurting people. I'm like, oh my gosh, all these skills that I gave. I went the other way. I started this hard style, and I used these skills to hurt others, and I felt guilty. And I went into my Sifu at the time, like, I think I'm gonna have to stop sparring. They're like, "What?" Like, everyone, what? So eventually I got around it and found a way to continue to do what I do without the guilt. But how did you handle that? I don't know if you went through a similar experience, or how did you go through this from healing to hurting? Like, how do you work with that in your mind?
Well, I've always been super compassionate, right? So at least last thing I wanted to do was hurt. First of all, I didn't want to get myself hurt too. So part of the martial arts was that. I remember playing football. I didn't want to get hit. People thought I was just, "You're good." I said, "No, I'm scared. I'm not good. I'm scared." And that's why no one would ever touch me. And plus, I had the martial arts ability, right? And I used to run track and all that. But I mean, I would much rather, and my first lesson to my students is, reach out my hand to help you up, then close my fist to knock you down. That's power, right? When I can help another human being up, I feel strong. I feel like I can help This is strength. Knocking someone down is when you're at your last wits. That's like that's the rawest form of, you know, and you talk and you look. 30 years of war, right? I mean, I'm such on a pendulum swing that, you know, belonging to this war machine, that we've been busy the whole time I was in. And this whole other side, when I go home and I just center and I would help people. And this is why I got into the healing arts. And this was even during my military career. It just to be able for somebody to say, oh my God, I don't feel pain anymore. And that would give me less pain. Or, oh my gosh, I couldn't move like that. My headache's gone, you know? And it wasn't anything magic. What it was the compassion and the working through and figuring it out. They gave me this like peacefulness. Then, you know, you go train, you train. So the training part of me is, like I said, that pendulum swings, right? So I'll go in there and I love physical sports. I play softball, you're gonna get hit somehow. Somehow I'm running into you. It's just, you know, I'll play golf when it becomes full contact. So I just like now, and as I get older, like I said, you know, I'll be 60 in about a week. We have to learn to have that pendulum swing back. So not only helping others heal, we need to always heal ourselves. You know, you see the martial artist, 50 years of training, can barely walk. You know, and self-defense is first healing, right? Taking care of yourself. That's a self-defense. So it's never too late, but you got to do some catching up. We have to find that balance within. So I never had that real, oh, the martial arts is causing me to hurt someone, because in my heart, I never wanted to hurt anyone. In my heart, I wanted to really help and learn this skill, because if I ever have to defend my loved ones or others, I'm on. It's there. We're going, right? But that's not my heart. And that's why, and believe this, and I never tell anyone this, right? And a lot of people out there probably say, oh my gosh, that's bullshit. I have never, because of conflict and argument, fought another person. I'm not saying I never got into scuffles. I used to work as a doorman. And I was in some good brawls, martial arts against martial arts, testing the skills. I did have my contacts, so it's not about, you know, and I say that from the ego, right? Everyone says, oh my gosh, you did. No, we all do that, right? But that's the truth. But as far as, in fact, I don't think there's ever been besides wife's girlfriend, or wife, wife, girlfriend. I've never had argument with people. I don't, you know, it's like, I tend to find that way of giving and receiving and understanding that I can't accept the experience of you as truth. I have to experience myself. So I can't expect others to expect my experience or accept it. They have to experience themselves. So when I say something and they don't agree, it's like, okay, yeah. So, I mean, or, you know, it's like, and I tell you, being in the military was a hard game, right? So we started off, you know, 18 years old. I ran into boot camp and they were on me. They were on me, like, you know, just crazy. I was always a little built. They were anything or something. Every time someone got in trouble, they punished me. Just took a few deep breaths and I rolled with it, right? It was good. It was like, okay, I can handle, physically, I can handle anything. So I never had that. It's always, I've had a quiet heart a lot. And it just, loner. Yeah, I've been by myself in my mind way back when. In many of my travels and many of my military work, it was solo, right? So, I mean, that's just me. So, you know, and that's why healing arts is very important to me. And if folks could, and I always say, start with yourself. You know, start with your breath, right? So that's the only thing we're given is one breath. Inhale on birth, exhale on death. In between, it's up to you, right? It's that beautiful sacred pause. It's that beautiful, just like, if you could just synchronize the mind and the body, it's like Tai Chi Chuan. You know, Tai Chi Chuan is moving meditation, synchronizing mind, body, and spirit, right? So inhale, exhale. No specific moves, just do it while walking. You know, I worked with this one guy that was going to teach me Tai Chi when I was 17 years old. I was impatient. I was like, yeah, I'm running Kaiser Kimball, I'm good. No, let's walk. So I went to San Francisco, me and my friend, we walked with him and we walked to the park. I said, good, I'm ready to go. I had my little backpack with my stuff. I didn't know what Tai Chi was. We go there and we walked and sat and talked. We went to eat. Didn't do anything. Next day we got up. I said, oh, we're going to get up early. And then we went. And I said, when are we going to learn Tai Chi? He goes, oh, we've been doing Tai Chi. He goes, when you walk, you breathe. When you reach, you be mindful. You flow, he said, he goes, now let's do it differently today. And we walked, and everything I did, I'm like, golden. I don't have to be any specific place. The world is my dojo, right? Here I am, and everything I do and every way about it is just mindful, right? And then you get off that, right? Sometimes it's not, and you get a little off too. But like you said, we bring it back, but it's mindful. So, that meditation, moving meditation, mindfulness, all of these things, bring yourself to the center. If you get folks to be there also, they start to heal. Healing starts with the mind, right? The body it's amazing. But if this right here is off, if you're stuck. And like you said, doing the dance and you just felt like caring for someone, sometimes got emotional, those emotions get stuck in the body. And when things release, they come up. Why? Why are there tears in my eyes? It was stuck there, man. Something triggered it. Don't delve in, just let it flow. Let that beautiful emotion, which is so important in life, just go through its cycle. Because, one day tears turn to laughter, laughter turns to anger, and it just goes. It has to. If you suppress it, though, it'll come out another day. It'll come out as anger. Or you'll change that fear, right, into anger. That fear changes to anger real quick.
Oh yeah.
But it's like that sacred pause and really evaluate what's real and what's this past illusion coming into my mind about what might be going on. How many times have we worried so much about something, and when it happened, it wasn't so bad. I crack up when I do that. I'm not the monk, right? And I don't want to be the monk. I experience life, right? I drink my wine, I drink my tea, I drink some more wine, I enjoy this, I enjoy that, I'll cuss, I'll do that. I never want to be one extreme, but I know that I have monk-like qualities, right? And what does that mean? I have the ability to be at peace with myself. I have the ability to be in touch with whatever we want to interpret this as up here, right? That whole connection, body, mind, and spirit. That's the beautiful thing, right? And when I can breathe in a field with nothing around me and be happy, I'm good, right? That's kind of like my peace, right? I always say that.
Finding your center, right? And I think that's again, if anybody listening to this, before we wrap up, if there's any message I can give to people that are wondering about the healing arts and mindfulness, it's not about religion. It's not about that. It's about finding yourself. And if you think you're not capable of this, I remember I said that to, I was with someone who practiced Buddhism, and they were studying a lot of the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh. Mm-hmm. He's for those of you that don't know, he's a refugee, came from Vietnam, escaped the war, and went through a lot of shit to avoid being persecuted for following his beliefs in Buddhism. But long story short, they're a Thich Nhat Hanh practitioner, and they told me about their practice, and I went to the temple. I got to hear him speak, and the whole time I never went inside. I just felt like I couldn't go inside the temple, like I didn't belong. I didn't deserve to be in that space, so I just sat outside and worked on my meditation techniques with my friend. And later I told another friend of mine, she said, I said, I really like this, but they're talking about being vegetarian, and they're talking about this stuff that I just can't do. Therefore, I can't be. I said, I just can't. I love this, but I can't. I just can't. And I said, I didn't even say that to her. I just said that in general. And then she turned around to the group that we were with, and she said, Angelo says that he can't, but I just want to let him know that he doesn't have to. Those words, and this girl in the group was young. She must have been like in her early 20s, and I was in my 30s talking about how I just can't. I'm like, I can't. I can't. And she says, no, you are. She said, you're doing it. Stop being so hard on yourself.
Yes.
And I think that's what we do, right?
You did that with meditation practice, right? So when I share with folks meditation, the first thing they say is, I can't stop your thoughts. I said, I can't either, and you never will. I go, it's not about stopping thoughts. It's about not grasping on and hanging on to them. Let them fly by like clouds. I go, but you'll find out there will be moments between those thoughts that come more frequent. And that's a space where magic happens. That's a space when you're in touch with whatever you really are without being interpreted through your mind. That moment, which is valuable. And the more that happens, the more great things start to happen peacefully within your body, because that's where your temple is, right here. You know, you sit anywhere, you can take that sacred breath. I can go into a meditative state in a breath, just, and just the beauty of everything around me just like enhances. And that's because of practice. Doesn't take a lot of time, doesn't take a lot, it takes a lot of effort, right? Practice. But it's like that punch, right? You can throw a punch right now. It's just, why? Because you did it 1,000 times. Well, meditate when you can. 5 minutes is just like an hour, because the illusion of time, you know, is amazing. You know, you just think, if you get 5 minutes to just breathe and don't really grasp on, pretty soon those thoughts will flow. You'll find moments between them, which you won't even realize, but you ask about them. I didn't think, you know, that's the whole mind trying to make sense of the senseless. Because there's no sense there, right? There's no sensing. And that's what we try to get away from. If we could do that every now and then, you get in touch with some deep, beautiful stuff. And you have good love for people and everything that lives, right? And respect. And that's what you do. We have to survive, right? So you got to eat that meat. You got to cut that steak if that's your thing, right? But it's about not disrespecting, not killing just to kill, you know, not doing all those things, not harming just to harm, you know. I've learned, you know, in Thailand, it was beautiful. I was sitting at a restaurant. There was a bug on the table. My friends were about to, you know, the old American, get the shoe off and smash it. The guy said, no. He came, picked it up with a napkin, put it outside. He said, we don't kill here in Thailand like that. We don't believe in that. I'm like, oh, this is where I need to be. You know, not in Thailand, but in that space here. I don't do that just to do that. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's a really good place to wrap it up. I think you tied it in really well. But before we do the official wrap up, now we're in the official wrap up mode. There's not music playing during this, but there's music playing in the YouTube video. I'll pretend it's playing. I'll pretend we can hear it. Before we wrap up, brother, is there anything you want to promote, or anything you want to mention to anyone listening before we finish up?
Well, you know, I mean, we all need some sort of healing, right? So find your place at it within, if you're a martial artist or not, right? It doesn't mean just martial arts, but we all need some self-work, whether it be just the breath. We all need some work with the body. We all need some work with the mind, body, spirit balance. Do your work. Take a little bit of time. If you're in the martial arts, I say, you know, get in touch with healing arts and helping others. Don't use these wonderful tools just to destroy. Use them to help bring things back to balance for yourself, understand, and for others. Find a place where, you know, it's not about the healer, where it's about the knowledge of health, and the knowledge of caring, the knowledge of bringing everything to balance as it should. That's kind of it, man.
No, I think that is it. I think that would be, if there was ever an it, that is it. Well, Glen, thank you so much for being on the show. For my listeners, I should have said this first. I probably didn't. Please subscribe, hit like, and smash that notifications button an hour later if you stuck around this long. This is why I don't have that many subscribers, man. But either way, thank you. Thank you for listening. And I release 2 of these a month, sometimes more, but usually 2 of these podcasts a month. So just stay tuned for the next one. Social Gelo with Angelo, not the official Kaiju Kembo podcast, a podcast about psychology, martial arts, and today about healing. And I'll catch you all next time. Peace.